welcome to the Thinking Stack.
Great to be here.
You know that feeling, that little gnawing thing you get when you're scrolling through LinkedIn maybe, or wherever you get your dose of comparison.
Oh yeah, the curated perfection feed.
Right. Everyone seems to be operating on this, I don't know, superhuman level, CEO by 30, 6 side hustles, all killing it, running marathons for fun.
Yeah, the endless highlight reel.
And it can leave you feeling just, well, inadequate. Like you're falling behind if you're not constantly producing something. Your worth feels less.
Absolutely, that subtle creeping pressure. The idea that your value is somehow like directly proportional to your busyness. Even taking a break starts to feel wrong.
Exactly. And that whole swampy feeling, that's what we're diving into today. Hustle culture. Not just, healthy ambition that's different. This is that relentless, almost anxious drive, the kind that ties your whole sense of self-worth to output. It feels different, heavier.
It really does. There's a frantic energy to it sometimes, that constant need to prove something. So how are we tackling this beast?
We're bringing out the integrated thinking stack, our ITS framework. Think of it like 7 different lenses.
7 layers.
Yeah, 7 layers to really dissect it. We'll look at the cognitive side, how it messes with our thinking, then the moral angle, the systemic picture, how it physically feels.
Why we even buy into it in the first place.
Right, how risky it all is. And then importantly, how we might actually, find an alternative path.
Okay, so 7 layers to get beyond the sort of surface level, Instagrammable hustle quotes and really understand the mechanics.
Exactly. And the big question weaving through all this, the one for you listening to really chew on is, well, is hustle culture just capitalism's ultimate fantasy? It's perfect dream.
Ooh, provocative.
Yeah. Is it the ideal setup for a system that needs endless growth? A population that's always working, always anxious, always driving itself.
A self-motivating, perpetual motion machine of labor. Let's dig in.
Let's do it. Layer 1. Cognitive cleanse. So, stripping it back, what is hustle culture at its core? What are the actual beliefs holding it up?
Fundamentally, it's a belief system, often unspoken, right? That says your value, your actual worth as a person, is directly linked to how productive you are. Constantly.
It's not just about enjoying your work or having goals. It's this background hum of needing to be always on, always producing, always optimizing. For who, though?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It often feels like performing for some invisible audience, and that's where the anxiety really kicks in. This pervasive pressure. It's often driven by a fear, right? Fear of being left behind, fear of not being enough.
Yeah, it's not always that pure intrinsic motivation of, I love this project.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels more like scrambling, frantically trying to keep up on some treadmill you can't see.
There's a quote I saw that just nailed it for me. Hustle culture isn't ambition, it's anxiety marketed as virtue.
Oh, wow. Say that again?
Hustle culture isn't ambition, it's anxiety marketed as virtue.
That clicks. It really reframes the whole thing. It takes that feeling of stress, of maybe desperation, and spins it. Makes it sound noble, like dedication.
Exactly. It co-opts the language of virtue for something potentially quite damaging. It's marketing, essentially. Turning a negative anxiety into a supposed positive, being driven. But what's the actual impact of running on anxiety? Let's look at some data.
Okay.
Statista this year, 2024, they looked at Gen Z and side hustles. You know the image, right? The passion project turned empire.
Yeah, everyone's monetizing their hobbies.
Well, the reality, for 70% of Gen Z with side hustles, it's not passion.
No, then what?
Financial necessity. They need the money. It's about making rent, paying bills, just surviving in a tough economy.
So much for the glamorous passion economy. That really bursts the bubble. It shows the precariousness underneath it all for so many people.
Right. It's not aspirational. It's often just patching holes. And the toll isn't just mental or financial, is it? The physical cost can be huge.
Yeah, you hear about burnout, but is it more than that?
Oh, definitely more. The World Health Organization, back in 2022, they drew a direct line. Working over 55 hours a week, which, let's be real, is pretty standard in deep hustle territory.
Yeah, that's often seen as the minimum, almost.
They linked that level of work to 745,000 premature deaths every year.
Wait, 745,000? That's staggering. Premature deaths from what? Just working too much?
Mostly stroke and ischemic heart disease. So this isn't about feeling a bit frazzled. This is a work pattern that can literally kill you. It's deadly serious.
So when you feel that pressure, that internal must do more, remember that number, the stakes are potentially life and death.
Exactly. So cognitively, what we're seeing is a belief system often fueled by anxiety, magnified by economic necessity for many, with potentially fatal outcomes. Doesn't sound quite so aspirational now, does it?
Not even close.
Yeah.
That's heavy. And it leads straight into the next layer, right? Layer 2, moral intelligence.
Precisely. If this culture causes real harm, tangible harm, then we have to ask, who benefits? What are the ethics here?
Yeah, where does that line sit between, personal drive and, well, systemic exploitation?
Well, some analyses are pretty blunt. Allianz Journal, last year, they called it, and this is intense, a new phase of slavery.
Slavery.
Wow.
That's strong language.
It is, but their argument was about self-imposed servitude, driven by, guess what? Capitalism's demand for endless growth.
Okay, unpack that. Self-imposed servitude.
The idea is the pressure isn't always external, like a direct order, it's internalized. Because of economic insecurity, because of the cultural narrative, you feel you have no choice but to push yourself relentlessly. You police yourself.
Right. You feel guilty for resting. You feel like you should be working.
Exactly. Guilt for resting. And that bizarre celebration of burnout we see sometimes, people bragging about how little sleep they got.
Yeah, like exhaustion is a status symbol.
Morally, that feels deeply weird, twisted even.
Yeah.
So who gains from a workforce that feels guilty for resting and sees burnout as noble?
Well, it seems pretty clear. The system itself. Capitalism gets this highly motivated, often cheap, self-disciplining workforce. People pushing themselves to the limit out of internal anxiety. It's efficient.
Scarily efficient, maybe, because the control mechanism is inside your own head. It's not a manager looming over you. It's your own fear and guilt doing the work. So the moral question for you listening becomes, is it ethical to prop up a system that seems to thrive on this?
Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Which then makes you think about the bigger picture, layer 3. Systemic foresight. What happens if this becomes the way we work? Long term.
Short term? Sure. You might see productivity spikes, companies hit their targets, looks good on paper.
But zoom out. What's the cost down the line?
Long term, you're potentially looking at system-wide burnout, like societal level exhaustion. Imagine a whole society running on empty. What does that do to innovation, to creativity, to simple, basic well-being?
And the mental health implications must be massive. All that constant low-grade anxiety.
Has to be. You'd expect a surge in mental health crises. And think about inequality. Who can actually sustain this kind of pace indefinitely?
Right. You need resources, support, the ability to maybe step back sometime.
Exactly. So it likely widens the gap between those who have resources and those who don't. It creates like a two-tier system of well-being. Only the privileged can afford not to hustle themselves into the ground.
That makes sense. Are we seeing any signs of this playing out?
Well, interestingly, yes. There seems to be some pushback brewing. The Guardian had a piece projected for 2025, actually, about Gen Z.
Oh, yeah. What about them?
They're increasingly rejecting hustle culture. Apparently, after watching millennials burn out, they're saying, nope, not for me. They're prioritizing stability, well-being.
Smart. Learning from the generation before.
Maybe a necessary course correction. You can think of hustle culture like an engine running on human fuel. You can redline it for a while, sure. Get a burst of speed.
But eventually.
Eventually, you run out of fuel. The engine seizes. The whole system becomes brittle, fragile, not resilient at all. That exhaustion debt, as some call it, it has to be paid eventually.
So systemically, it's not sustainable. It looks more like a recipe for eventual breakdown.
Seems that way.
Real.
Which brings us nicely to layer 4, embodied insight. How does all this actually feel? In our bodies, in our minds? What's the lived reality?
We mentioned burnout becoming a twisted badge of honor.
Yeah.
That normalization is so damaging, isn't it? It makes you feel like you're the problem if you can't keep up.
Totally. And just think about that constant, low-level anxiety becoming your default state. That hum of not enough, the racing thoughts, the knot in your stomach, that's not normal, but it becomes normalized.
And imposter syndrome just thrives in that environment, right? Feeling like a fraud no matter how hard you work.
Absolutely. And let's just call it what it is. Depression is a highly likely outcome here. Living under that kind of constant, relentless pressure, it's not a personal failing to feel depressed. It's almost a natural response to an unnatural situation.
Yeah, it feels like it goes against how we're wired, fundamentally.
It does. We evolved for community, connection, rhythm, periods of effort, periods of rest. Hustle culture demands constant individual striving, isolates us, and turns our need for validation into this anxious hamster wheel of performance.
Keep performing, keep posting, keep proving. Ugh. And our bodies are screaming at us the whole time, aren't they?
Constantly sending signals, chronic fatigue, getting sick all the time, headaches, gut issues. Your body is saying, whoa, buddy, slow down.
But the narrative is push through.
Right.
Pain is weakness leaving the body.
Right.
All that toxic stuff, treating ourselves like machines.
Exactly. Like we're just hardware that needs to be pushed harder, not organisms that require rest, recovery, care. It's this profound disconnect from our own physical selves.
It's madness when you actually stop and think about it.
Okay.
So if it feels bad, is it bad for us systemically?
Yeah.
Layer 5, human-centered design. Why do we buy into it? What makes it so sticky?
Well, because it's cleverly designed, you could argue. Cynically, perhaps, but cleverly. It taps right into our core vulnerabilities.
Like what?
Like that deep-seated fear of not being good enough. Like the very real anxiety about economic instability that many people face. Like our basic human need for belonging, for approval from the group.
It weaponizes those things almost.
You could say that. It frames rest not just as unproductive, but as like a moral failing, laziness. If you're not monetizing your hobby, you're wasting time, wasting potential.
That pressure is intense. Everything has to be a side hustle. And seeing it everywhere online, those curated success stories, it creates this massive pressure to conform.
Totally. There was that piece in Her Campus, remember? About young women in corporate America.
Vaguely. What was the gist?
It described how they were internalizing this intense pressure, leading to fierce competition against each other. Collaboration was seen as weakness. They called it emotional cannibalism.
Emotional cannibalism. Wow. That's bleak. Hustle culture turning people against each other.
Yeah, pitting everyone against each other in this desperate scramble. And the final trick. When you inevitably burn out because the pace is insane.
The blame falls on you.
Exactly. It's never the system's fault. It's your fault. You weren't resilient enough. You didn't manage your time well. You didn't have enough grit.
It's a masterful deflection. The individual takes the hit for systemic flaws. Okay. So layer 6, risk and resilience. Let's stress test this. How sturdy is an economy, a society built on this?
Well, I mean, common sense suggests. Not very, right? If your foundation is built on running people ragged, pushing them past their limits constantly, that sounds inherently fragile.
Yeah, what happens when a real shock hits? Like an economic crisis or, a pandemic, something unexpected.
A workforce that's already redlining, already depleted, has zero buffer, no reserve capacity to cope, to adapt, to respond effectively. They're brittle.
Whereas a workforce that's generally healthy, rested, feels secure, they'd probably handle shocks much better, more adaptable.
Stands to reason, doesn't it? And we're already seeing the warning signs, the cracks appearing in this hustle model.
Like what?
Like the burnout stats we talked about, the mental health crisis, that Gen Z rejection we mentioned. These aren't signs of a robust system. They're signs of a shaky foundation, a narrative that's starting to fray.
So the whole idea that hustling harder makes an economy stronger, more anti-fragile, that's just wrong.
It seems completely backwards. It looks much more likely that it breeds fragility. It's a house of cards built on, adrenaline and caffeine fumes. Looks impressive until a gust of wind comes along.
Okay, it's bad for us, ethically dubious, systemically wonky, and fragile. So, the big one, layer 7, execution engine. How do we get out of this? What do we do?
And crucially, this can't just be about telling individuals to, practice self-care. Bubble baths aren't going to fix a systemic issue. We need bigger changes, structural changes.
Right. Address the roots, not just the symptoms. Like what kind of structural shifts?
Well, look at the momentum behind the 4-day work week. That's a big one.
Yeah, I've seen companies trying that. Basecamp, Buffer, Kickstarter, I think.
Right. And often they report that productivity doesn't drop. Sometimes it even increases. It forces a focus on results, not just hours clocked.
Makes sense. Work smarter, not just longer. What else?
The absolute necessity of living wages. If people aren't terrified about making rent, maybe they don't need 3 side hustles. Yeah. It tackles that core economic anxiety.
That feels fundamental. Reducing the sheer pressure to constantly earn more.
Exactly. And then better protections around work-life balance. Things like
mandatory vacation time. That people actually use.
Yes, and feel safe using. Plus, the whole right to disconnect movement, laws that say your employer can't expect you to be available 24/7, setting real boundaries.
That seems essential for mental health.
Yeah.
Reclaiming personal time.
And fundamentally, we need to redesign work itself. Shift the focus entirely away from hours and onto outcomes. Value the result, not the effort theater. Build cultures where rest isn't weakness, but is understood as vital for performance.
Where taking a break is normal, even encouraged. And the companies doing this stuff, they seem to be doing okay.
Better than okay, often. They report happier teams, less burnout, lower staff turnover, more creativity, more innovation. It turns out treating people like humans is actually good business strategy.
Imagine that. So building something better isn't just wishful thinking. It's possible. And maybe necessary.
Seems both possible and increasingly necessary.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up then. We went through the 7 ITS layers, and that initial question, is hustle culture capitalism's wet dream? Where do we land?
Well, the evidence we looked at, it strongly suggests, yeah, it kind of is. It's anxiety repackaged and sold as ambition. It's a system that benefits hugely from having a workforce that's anxious, cheap, and drives itself into the ground.
Yeah, a pretty raw deal wrapped up in, like, aspirational Instagram posts. And the key takeaway for you listening is not just about maybe working fewer hours, though that might be nice.
Right. The real goal is to think more clearly, to use frameworks like this, like the ITS, to see these systems for what they are.
To cut through the noise.
Yeah.
And to start asking yourself some pointed questions next time you feel that pressure mounting.
Questions like, what am I actually reinforcing when I wear my exhaustion like a badge of honor?
And who really truly benefits if I burn myself out chasing this?
And maybe the biggest one, what's the hidden cost? To my health? Yeah, but also to my relationships, to just living my life.
Because real freedom, genuine well-being, it's probably not found in hitting the next productivity metric. It's found in thinking more clearly, more critically.
And knowing, really knowing that your worth as a person, it's inherent. It's not tied to your output. It just is.
Your worth is inherent. It's not your output. Say it again.
Your worth is inherent. It is not your output.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for going deep on this with us today. It's uncomfortable, but I think it's really important to question these dominant narratives.
Absolutely. And the questioning continues next time. We're diving into the morality of meaning-making. Big question. Do we essentially lie to ourselves to survive?
Ooh, that sounds juicy. Definitely tuning in for that one. Until then, keep thinking, keep questioning, and please remember, you are so much more than what you produce.